Hello, and welcome to Consider the Source Conversations. I'm so thrilled to be joined today by director and designer Netia Jones, who will be directing, scenic designing, costume designing, and projection designing for this summer's production of Britain's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Welcome, Netia. I'm so thrilled to be speaking with you today.
Lovely to be here.
Could you speak about your first encounter with opera?
Well, I was taken to the opera with my school. I'm completely a fan of school visits to the opera. In fact, I guess Midsummer Night's Dream is one of the pieces that is quite often deemed to be a school's opera. I'm not sure I quite agree with that, actually, because I think Midsummer Night's Dream is possibly darker than some people think it is. But actually, the opera that I went to first was Peter Grimes, which nobody would describe as a children's work in any way, shape, or form. But the music is so phenomenal. The experience was really, really amazing, and one that has stayed with me actually for, well, up until now.
Wonderful. You have a long history with Britain, Britain in particular. Could you speak about the role of Britain in kind of conceptualizing your trajectory as an artist?
Yeah, I think, there's something about being from this country that, and if you're involved in music in any way, and I was put on the violin when I was very young, when I was 3 or 4, and music was very, very central to my life. And Benjamin Britten is always there. There's 2 of them. There's Purcell and there's Benjamin Britten, and they're just there. They're part of the ether. But I was lucky enough to have a relative who lived in Aldborough. And so quite soon after this totally formative event of seeing Peter Grimes, I would go to Aldborough. And there's something about that place which is, it's so creative, and it's so much kind of woven into the musical landscape of Benjamin Britten that it became like a second language. It's almost a kind of musical language that is like home. It's very, very familiar. And I've worked a lot with his music now. In fact, I've done a number of projects for the Aldborough Festival, which he founded and which he set up. And it's just always an immense pleasure to work with this material. And like I say, it kind of feels like a homecoming. Having said that, I am very excited by the idea of approaching Benjamin Britten's music far away from Aldborough, because that is quite liberating. There's something about taking it far that actually kind of releases you, I think, from the responsibilities, if you like. And there's just a new light shone on the piece. And I'm just excited by that. I'm excited by what that means to be exploring the music of Benjamin Britten in Santa Fe. I think it's a different undertaking.
Yeah, 2 things strike me as really fascinating here. One being the relationship between place and the music, and the Santa Fe Opera Theater seems to offer really exciting potential in that regard. But also the relationship between Shakespeare. You've spoken about the relationship between Shakespeare and performing in the United States. And so if either of those bring up ideas about this production, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, the Shakespeare thing is exactly the same, because the history of Shakespeare in the States is absolutely fascinating, and rich, because it's almost like written in the Constitution. Shakespeare, the love of Shakespeare, the fact that Shakespeare was everywhere. Shakespeare was in every pioneer town, in every saloon. There would be performances on tree trunks. This was all new to me. I had no idea about this. But what you get is a version of Shakespeare which is much more authentic. Because if you think about the original Shakespeare performances, they weren't just for the hoity-toities. They were really, really open. There was all kinds of people that would go. And the theatre was very central to life. And that you feel that was also the case in the kind of proliferation of performances of Shakespeare across the States, and especially in the West and the Midwest. So I think there's an amazing history. And that in itself, as I say, is again kind of liberating, because what happens with Benjamin Britten's Midsummer Night's Dream is he does his own interpretation of it, which takes a little step away from Shakespeare, because he has you could possibly say he has a more 19th century version of what Midsummer Night's Dream might mean. And so when you come to the States and you can kind of get back to the nitty gritty of what might be offered up in the Shakespeare, that's a nice place to start from. And, that was really very informative to me when I was thinking of, well, what can this mean? Not just what does it mean, but what can it mean? What can it kind of conjure up? And like you say, the venue, well, I mean, it's just special. It's absolutely amazing.
Have there been any possibilities that opened up in kind of conceptualizing along with the space of the Santa Fe Opera Theater?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've done a lot of site-specific work. I'm really excited by that. I'm very excited by the kind of exchange between the environment and the piece. And I'm not afraid of the weather. I mean, I think the weather is something that gives you chance encounters in the most magical way. You can't control it. And as a theatre director and designer, what you're used to be able to do is to kind of control every aspect of the environment, the light, the sound, and even the temperature. You can't control any of those things when you're working in a venue like Santa Fe. But on the flip side, you get amazing moments, that are beyond the imaginative sphere. So this has happened in all of the site-specific or more outdoors work that I've done. You have a sudden moment of the sunset, or thunderstorms and lightning. I think that sounds rather exciting. So the outside environment is taking part in your performance, and what could be better really when you're dealing with Midsummer Night's Dream? I mean, it's couldn't be more perfect, really.
Wonderful. I think it's interesting to think about conceptualizing a production starting with place. Do you always start with place, or what is your process when engaging with a work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I guess it's always slightly different, but something that I am really interested in is thinking about what it means to do a particular performance in a particular place. And I think with something like Midsummer Night's Dream, it's so open to interpretation. It really is the richest starting point. And so actually you can take it in lots of different directions. And in order to kind of hone in on one, or at least an overriding concept that's going to be holistic, the environment and what that might mean is quite a nice place to start. As I say, because I've done a lot of site-specific work, it's something that my mind goes to kind of straight away. But also because I think that is part of the experience of the audience, the journey to the venue, where the venue is, what the venue feels like, all of those things I think have a bearing on the interpretation of the piece. And then again, it just offers up some really lovely lines of thought. And so while I was in New Mexico and traveling around New Mexico, the things that struck me had a great deal of relevance to the kind of material in Midsummer Night's Dream. And I think that is this idea of syzygy, the idea of counterpoints. So you have the scientific and you have the artistic, and you have the kind of rational and you have the irrational. And of any state that I've ever visited, these two polar opposites kind of reside next to each other, in New Mexico, in a way that just really lights up the imagination. So that was absolutely fascinating. And then the other thing that I've talked quite a lot about is this idea of cosmology, because cosmology is so integral to this play. It really is the heart and soul of this play. And cosmology is obviously, and the ideas of the cosmos and astronomy and stargazing, all of these things are quite important in New Mexico. So that's another really nice kind of jumping off point. And then when you go from cosmology and you get the idea of, the cosmos and the circles and Copernicus and Ptolemy and all of this, you get quite swiftly to Jung, Freud and Jung, because obviously when you're dealing with Midsummer Night's Dream, there's always the spectre of Freud, an interpretation of dreams. I mean, he wasn't the first. There was Thomas Hill in the 16th century who also published something called The Interpretation of Dreams. So you get that nice bridge. But also then I found out that Jung had visited New Mexico. And Jung's visit to New Mexico just strikes me as it must have been the oddest thing. I can't even really picture it. I think it was in 1920, or it was in the 20s, might have been 1925. you might know. And that as a vision was yeah, quite interesting to me. But it's all there in the Midsummer Night's Dream. Both Freud and Jung loved this play, and you know, this idea of the shadow and the conscious and the unconscious, and reality and dreaming, what is real, what is imaginary, you know, it's all there in this multi-layered thing.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's something so exciting and interesting about the way that we encounter operas as artists, as audience members over the course of a lifetime, always in different positions, always in different. So there's the interaction of space, but also the interaction of time. And this year it seems quite lovely to be returning to the stage, which most of us have been away from for quite some time, with the play that takes up theatrical spectacle as one of its central points of focus. Are there any other dimensions that seem particularly potent in this moment?
I think that's such a lovely point. I completely agree with you. And I think the extraordinary thing through one's own life is when you encounter and then re-encounter and then re-encounter works of art or books or operas or pieces of music, and they mean different things and they feel different. And I think what you say is so true. I think all of us, when we finally get back to going to live performance, to sharing with each other, everything will feel different. And I'm excited to see what that really means. I think it'll mean a lot for us in the rehearsal room. I think we will rehearse in a different way. I think we'll interact in a different way. And I think for that reason, you know, all is not lost, because I feel that there'll be a richer and deeper and greater appreciation for, you know, the opportunity to do this. And as you say, this brilliant play is about playmaking. It's about the power of the imagination. And in a way, in times as difficult as these, where everybody really is reaching out in order to be able to get through it, it is the power of the imagination that has steered us through. And this play is an extraordinary celebration of that, and of the idea of completeness, you know, that out of chaos can emerge a greater kind of harmony. So you have in this play the upending of everything. We get into everything is topsy-turvy, everything is chaos and carnage and out of control. And then order and stability are reasserted. And it's just an incredible, and I think very poignant play to be looking at as we emerge from this period. It's beautiful, beautiful piece. And it's also just such beautiful music. We'll probably all be in tears.
I think so. I think so. I've been trying to prevent myself from projecting to what that moment will feel like, but it's almost impossible to sort of conceptualize what that means, or what the loss of that as a space has meant. I think many people are also thinking about sort of ways that this moment is an opportunity, taking us out of our routines of approaching the theater and season tickets of long-standing, thinking about different ways that we can engage in that way. And your work naturally engages the technological forefront. Are there any dimensions of theater making anywhere in the world, not just opera, that are exciting to you right now, that seem to hold potential?
Yeah, I mean, you know, although it has been obviously awful for so many people, and you know, all the work was lost, this last year has also been quite amazing, because I've always worked with technology. You know, it's something that I kind of espoused from very early on. I love it as a tool for theatre making, but this year we've really been exploring some super exciting technologies that we've had to, because you know, of distancing, or it was just impossible to do things in a different way. So on 2 shows I've explored a very, very extraordinary new innovations in sound technology. So how to deliver these incredible binaural 360-degree sound worlds for the moments that one can't tour an orchestra. And that was amazing. And then the other thing I've just been involved with is a VR opera, virtual reality opera, for the Royal Opera House. And that is, again, really thrilling, very, very exciting field to be kind of inching into. And so I think we know more clearly than ever before that we want and need and love live performance. We really do. We need to be together and we need to share our stories and our music. But we have got all kinds of other tools that we can also use to continue sharing for any moments that we can't actually be physically next to each other. So what has been nice for me is actually there's a broadening of kind of acceptance of the idea of technology, that technology isn't a bad thing. Technology can be really, really helpful. And, that's actually quite exciting. Definitely when I first started, my use of video or projection technologies in opera, it was, it was quite something. There was not so much of it going on. But my feeling now is that we will be able to embrace those technologies and just fold them in, into our art making. And I think that's great.
Yeah, it seems to me that the technology also can pose unique challenges that themselves kind of allow this possibility for new innovation or new lines of thought that aren't, if you're not rehearsing the same way, if you're not setting up in the same way, there are naturally improvisations that happen around that. Have there been moments when challenges in setting a piece opened up new possibilities?
So many. I mean, I think so. This year, just the idea that we've been rehearsing remotely is extraordinary. But then that opens up the possibilities of making work with people who are in different countries or miles away from you. And that's very exciting, because when geography is not any kind of boundary, you can, really start making some exciting discoveries. But really the thing that I think was in my whole kind of career, the thing that really opened my eyes is I did a performance again for the Opera Festival at a nuclear power station, and we were projecting at enormous scale mapping onto this nuclear power station, and everybody all the way through the year said, this is impossible, this is never going to happen, this is absurd, this is impossible. And it happened. And not only did it happen, we were out on this beautiful beach. The evening sunset just turned into the most kind of miraculous light show, and then the sun went down and we were in the darkness. We did the projection and we did the performance, and I think once I'd done that, I kind of felt anything is possible. I think when something is considered impossible, all that means is that's just a challenge, just a challenge to action. So yeah.
Wonderful. I can't help but ask before we close. In a year that we haven't been in the theater, we also haven't been moving in the same way that we have in the past. Are there any elements that you're looking forward to just in the physical journey to Santa Fe this summer?
Everything about that. I mean, genuinely, because a very big part of my life is traveling around, and the wonderful thing about that is interacting with people from very different places, but also with those incredible landscapes. So I mean, I'm sure everybody must feel the same way. I think it's just the expanding of the vistas, and where better vistas than in New Mexico. So yeah, I can't wait.
I know I'm one with everyone else who cannot wait to see your work on stage this summer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Netia.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.